long since I've been on a live stream, and I'm so excited to be on today and to be joined by one of my absolute favorites, Mr. Robert Krnovich, who is our VP of Client Success. Happy Friday, Robert.
Happy Friday. Hope you're doing well.
Yeah, I'm doing great. Our fearless leader likes to hog the camera, so I'm happy to be back on the live stream and to be talking about scoping projects, specifically in the public sector, right? When it comes to modernization, I see tons of RFPs every week with multiple layers when it comes to their scope and what they're wanting. And sometimes it is very well defined, and then other times it seems like they're throwing darts at a wall and trying to fit a lot into one tiny budget. Right. And I know from your side, whether it comes from an RFP or it comes from a conversation with a current client, sometimes it's hard to get these clients to see things from a holistic view. Right. And what we deal with on a daily basis and how we resource things. So I think this is a great topic of conversation, and we could go down a rabbit hole with this. But if you guys are joining us today, please let us know where you're joining from. Please comment, ask questions in the comment box. We love to hear from you all, and we love for you all to steer this conversation. So please comment. Let us know where you're joining from. If you are new to the channel, Avero Advisors is an independent third-party consultant only dealing in the public sector in terms of modernization projects. So our specialties include IT strategic planning, ERP consulting, and then also business process re-engineering, and now AI consulting. There's all this noise about AI and there's all these new products, but how does AI fit into your city, county, transit, or quasi-government agency? So I am going to stop talking for just a minute and kick us off here. Robert, when you first see a project scope, right, what are your initial fears? Right. What stands out about a scope to you, and how should our clients and prospects be thinking about scoping a project?
Yeah, you're exactly right. Every single time we look at one, it's a different animal. There's so many variations. There's so many possibilities with this. There's so many, in a lot of ways, missed opportunities with putting that together. So my biggest fear is one, it was written by one person, and so it represents just one person in the organization. That can be dangerous for reasons we'll talk about in a little bit. Two, it could also be completely unfocused.
Right.
Which means that you have to get a lot of information going in there. First of all, to bid it correctly, but two, once you get in there, going through this efficiently and getting them moving forward on a good timeline. What I mean by that is we could come in and we could spend 6 months, we could spend 9 months doing current state discovery and requirements definitions and having all these visioning sessions. Organizations don't have that time, and they don't have that budget either. We need to get in there quickly, figure things out quickly, lay them out correctly, start dealing with organizational change management from the get-go. So we can get you live on a system in a reasonable timeline, not something that's going to take multiple years to do. So that's one of the biggest tricks we have to do. I think the third fear that I have, and they're equal amongst the other two as well, is that this isn't tied to a specific vision of the governing body of the organization or the citizenry that they serve. That has a lot of problems down the road as well. If I walk into a situation where I tend to know all three of those very quickly, it's like, okay, this is going to be an incredibly short timeline to be able to see progress on a lot of this. But unfortunately, that's pretty rare. As in, I can think of maybe one example out of the past year and a half that I've actually seen that. That's how rare it is.
Yeah, and this topic was brought about because we recently were crafting an RFP response to an RFP that the scope was all over the place, right? It read like they wanted us to come in and assess their financial policies and procedures, but then they also needed some technology evaluations, right? They wanted us to look at their ERP system. They also wanted us to do business process mapping and this and that is all very doable, right? But there is a price to pay for that. And so as we're crafting our response, there was an addenda that came out, and they were like, oh, by the way, the budget for this is 34K. And so then 2 days before it's due, I'm going, hold on, we can't do all of this for that amount, right? So there was a budget amount. And so, I guess my next question, Robert, just based on that scenario alone, is how often are budgets approved before they go to RFP? I mean, probably all very often, right? But why is that a good or bad thing?
So it's usually, I came from 20 plus years in state and local government. Um, and usually when you're scoping something like this, because you often have to have this in the budget at least a year in advance,
Approved.
sometimes multiple
Yeah.
years. If someone has the vision enough to realize, okay, this is not just a 25K project, this is going to be a 250K project, then it often goes into another part of the budget. Sometimes it goes into capital improvement projects, especially if they're looking at hardware costs. Most of the time, this number is known well in advance, but you're
Hmm.
guessing because it's usually the internal folks who either have or have never been through an ERP replacement, guessing at a number, sticking it in there, and then thinking, well, we'll tweak it when we get closer to that. But that rarely happens, and you rarely have the opportunity to adjust the number. So you wind up getting something that's baked in from a couple of years ago that was done with the best of intentions, but the least amount of useful information as to how to scope it correctly. And that's where the challenges really start, because then we're having a conversation with the client of, we can look at your business processes, but this is really only going to allow us to look at like your key ones for each department, which a lot of times is actually okay. If you're in a state where your ERP system is in really bad shape, it hasn't been worked on in 20 plus years, it hasn't been maintained, you haven't been talking to the vendor, no one gets trained on the software anymore, no one even uses the software, payroll does everything manually. You're already in a state where we can assume that your current state is pretty bad, and we can start
Right.
working with you on future vision as to where do you want to go, and then let's take you there on a modern system, or re-leverage your existing one if there are obvious flaws that this wasn't maintained properly over the past 4 or 5 years. So perhaps you can re-leverage what you currently have because you're 7 versions behind. The new version provides you some good functionality. You don't have to buy a brand new system and go through that. But there's also the organizational change management aspect of it as well.
Hmm.
ERP projects are just so huge and so encompassing in people's minds. They think it touches absolutely everything, to your point. So they start bringing in these technology initiatives,
Yeah.
which are good to do, but a lot of this has to be sequenced correctly. You can't change the technology at the desktop in the middle of an ERP implementation. It needs to be done before, it needs to be done after. So just retiming these things. And then what does it come down to? Well, we only have this much approved for this year in the budget, but we have this much next year. Yeah, I feel for the people that have to put that together, because I know what they're going through. They're doing the best that they can to put together a decent number they can get in the budget and they can get approved. Um, what I always like to say is, if you're in that situation, give me a call, and I would be happy to give you some free advice as to how to sequence that project coming up, so that it can be better built to make that successful, and that selection and that timeline a lot more successful. But the budgeting often comes down to, it's just a number that someone heard or they thought or they tried their best to put together, stuck it in the budget a year ago, and hopefully that's enough to be able to get a client procured or a consultant procured and be able to start down the road of replacing your ERP.
Yeah, no, I agree with all of that, and I feel so bad for him too. I really do, which is kind of the reason the live stream was created to begin with, right? We really want to be that trusted advisor in this space, and we want to be a sounding board for our clients so that they do have resources. So, guys, please come to us if you have questions around scoping. Also, I love the idea of these agencies putting together and releasing an RFI and just stating the obvious, like, here's where we're at, here's our pain points, what do you think, and how would you go about doing this project? And then getting those responses in, and then crafting your RFP based on those responses. I love that idea. I know that it takes a lot more time, and again, time is not what our clients have. But I love the idea of releasing an RFI, just a request for information, because it's really hard for us to price things based on a scope that is all over the place. So anyway, I'm going to get off of that piece, and we're going to talk about where we can, where can our clients actually get this information? Like, from our live stream, right? From our social media content, but where do they go to research and build out a proper scope? Like, what are some things that they need to think about when they're going to the drawing boards?
Yeah, this is the tricky part because what I'm going to say is you need someone like us there to help you with that because it's a
Mhm.
combination of perhaps you're the CFO, you've been with this organization for 25 plus years, you've been through maybe one ERP replacement, maybe you weren't even the CFO at the time, maybe you were you're in payroll, you were a manager of a single workflow. Um, it is very difficult in how local government tends to feel very siloed about what they're doing. It's very difficult to be able to balance the perspective of what else is going on in the industry, what else is happening in local government, what did a comparable sized county in another state do in a situation like this, because they seem to have the same numbers we do in terms of staff, and they have a lot of union representation like we do as well, they're having to deal with all these little things, having to figure that out, which I rarely see clients be able to have the time and the resources to figure that out in the first place. You really need someone to look at all those and bring all those decision points and data points together, as well as the experience as what to expect with. You guys think you'd be a great platform for this product because you heard that a neighboring county went with it, but it actually isn't right sized for you. You need to be looking at this type of an ERP product. You need to be looking at best of breed in a particular situation.
Mhm.
So all these things that is very difficult, and we see that challenge too because it's difficult to market to local government because they tend to live in silos. They don't sit around all day watching YouTube videos. They should be watching
Right.
ours, but they don't spend the time like a lot of other sectors do, being able to reach out and look at the resources. And it's just simply a matter of resourcing. If you're
Yeah.
CFO and you're already wearing seven hats, I really don't have the time. Maybe when I'm at GFOA, I can talk to some vendors, which we had a chance to talk to several potential clients at GFOA. It's just very difficult to do without some sort of person on the outside who is able to give you the full perspective, both of what the software vendors are going to say and what they're going to expect and what they're going to respond to, and then what you actually need. So again, for me, it's just even calling us and having a conversation with us or reaching out to us and letting us talk to you. We love handing out those pointers that'll get the ball rolling for you, and getting you set up for the best possible chance to be
Mhm.
on budget and on time for what you're looking to do. And that really is what it boils down to. Because once the selection's been made, things start getting real. The amount of staff time you're going to need, all these sorts of things that you need to look at both in the short term and the long term, is what's going to give you the best success to do this correctly, on budget, on time, and with minimal disruption within your organization, is what it all boils down to.
If you're thinking about doing a technology strategic plan or a complete ERP overhaul, how early should you technically start planning for something like this?
What I like to say is the minute the thought pops into your mind of we need to look at our existing system, or we need to look at another system.
Hmm.
Literally the minute that pops into your mind. Ideally, that there's constant evaluation that's been done. And what we tend to do when we're doing IT strategic planning, it's usually off cycle to the ERP replacement, meaning many times ERP has already been replaced and it's 2 or 3 years in when we're doing the IT strategic planning, or they've already decided, I really don't like what we have. I want to look at something different, or I want to see what my options are. And so we tend to put together the strategic roadmap and the strategic plan, based on those two types of areas where you are in your life cycle with your current ERP. So the benefit we get is we tend to get in there in a pretty reasonable amount of time, and we're able to take a look at a number of things. First of all, is the initiative on your ERP coming for your IT department, which is a different animal nowadays.
Hmm.
There's a big shift from the CIO deciding a lot of the ERP to the CFO or chief of HR or assistant county director, some administrator. Sometimes it is the county administrator. Sometimes it's the governing board itself. So it doesn't necessarily have to live within the IT strategic plan, but very often that's how we get a chance to get in there and see where their current state is on their ERP, because they're already asking us questions of, when you guys
Hmm.
come in and you evaluate my hardware inventory, can you also tell me if there's a way we can get rid of all these printers? And usually
Yeah.
it's a process question. It's not a hardware question. It's a process question. If you stop printing things out and you handle documentation electronically, you don't need as many printers. Leads into another ERP discussion. So we had the benefit with the ITSPs of being able to IT strategic plans to be able to get in there and get them at the moment where they're usually one, they want to see what their current system, how the current system is doing. We're 2 or 3 years in. Tell me if it's working. Or like I said, they've already got this thought in their mind of, while you guys are in here taking a look at this, take a look at our ERP because we already are starting to have questions in our mind if this is the direction we want to go long term or if we need to go another direction.
Right. And in your opinion, do you think it makes sense for maybe just an initial needs assessment if an organization is just thinking about, maybe overhauling their ERP or maybe having somebody come in and do a technology strategic plan? Does it make sense to, procure a vendor to come in and just do an initial assessment to maybe do the things we're talking about, right? What is it that you need? How do you prioritize that? And then how do you put that in words in an RFP?
Agree. At a minimum, it warrants a conversation with someone like us. But yes, you can even call it a current state assessment, although sometimes clients think that means also we need to evaluate all of our processes. Now your
Right.
budget's getting bigger.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking just engaging us to be able to come in and take a look at some basic things, gather some information, tell you what the industry is doing, answer questions to your C-suite folks, answer questions to your governing board. More than happy to do those sorts of things. Yes, that type of an engagement, especially if it's before budget season and you really need to come out of this engagement having a decent number I can plug into my budget and know how I'm going to be able to afford replacement and what the long-term costs are going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, all that is incredibly timely, and it's again 20 plus years in state and local government for me. It was very difficult to do that internally, not only because of the
Right.
prioritization which you're already working on, but you really are living in a silo, and it's very difficult to sort through the information and determine what is and is not correct. And I just beg people, don't ask your software vendor to do the evaluation. Don't ask your existing
Yes.
ERP vendor to do the evaluation. We've seen this a lot. You're going to get the results you already suspect you've got in the back of your mind. They're going to recommend that you stay on their system, that you re-leverage, that you buy more modules, that you spend money to upgrade. Please don't just let the software vendors exclusively make those decisions for you.
Yes, it's very biased. Very, very biased. It is. We have a whole live stream on that topic alone. Please do not do that. Use someone who has an unbiased opinion. Um, What are some invisible costs that leaders may not think about? You mentioned process mapping, and we've talked about this, until we're blue in the face. But process mapping is one where your project costs can be immediately inflated because what is a process, right? And how detailed do you need to be? So I want to dive into these invisible costs that leadership or whoever's crafting the RFP may or may not be thinking about.
Oh yeah. So the balancing process definition and business process improvement is very tricky because we could go in and we can document every single process that you have, both current state and then take you into future state visioning, where then we work with you again to determine where do you want this process to go and how do you want it to be in a new system. And is that new process, does it have to absolutely be that way? In other words, it's an absolute this requirement that the system be able to do that, which is what gets into your requirement traceability matrix, goes into your procurement document, becomes part of your demo, contract negotiations, implementation. I'm highlighting the reason why a lot of this documentation up front is needed and how it pays off over the life cycle of ERP. Um, but you can also spend a lot of time. You can spend months and months documenting things that one are going to be completely changed anyway. Um, or two, you want to be able to see what the options are for a modern ERP system when they come in and they demo to you. You want to be able to see, you know what, that makes sense. I want to do the process that way, or I didn't realize it could be done that way. You can marry our experience with helping others with business process to do that without going down a road where suddenly you have a catalog of 400 business processes, which
Right.
It's great. It's wonderful. And a lot of times, if it's never been done, it actually allows the organization to come together on the same page and finally understand how a lot of these workflows work. If you have the time and resources to do that, by all means, do that. But most of the time, we're running into situations where it's like, I want an RFP on the street in 90 days. I want to be able to make a selection 30 to 45 days after that. And I want to start implementation within a month of that. Uh, that does not give you a lot of timeline or budget to be able to spend a lot of time documenting processes. So it's a balance between those two and figuring out what you're looking to do with your ERP replacement and setting you up on the path that makes sense for you. Hence the reason why we tend to propose 2 or 3 options.
Hmm.
How you want to do this. We can do this very quickly. We can put together the basics of what you need and get this on the street and get you to demo so you can see what a lot of these products are. Or if you want to spend more time because you think the process documentation is going to pay off as an organization long term and you really want to invest in those conversations and those sessions, we do that as well. It's just some clients don't have the ability or the timeline or the resources to do that.
Yeah, and I think another invisible cost, Robert, is, you know, R RFP responses. So once your ERP RFP is out on the street, when we're responding to RFPs for an ERP engagement, I'm probably confusing a lot of you all. I just realized that. But I always caveat and cap the number of responses that our clients get in because that is time and resources. And if I mean, think about going through 12 to 15 RFP responses and scoring those and then, doing the reference checks, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's one thing that these agencies don't think about is they could and should get multiple RFP responses back for their ERP engagement. But I know that in our responses, when we're responding, we like to caveat and cap because it is an invisible cost that could inflate your budget price.
Yeah, hidden costs. I'm even thinking of 2 distinct areas. The first one is along the vein of what we've just been talking about. If you haven't had a technology assessment and you don't know what the state of your cybersecurity is in, sometimes you have to stop and fix that before you can continue forward. That's a cost that wasn't factored in before. Um, the hardware aspects of it. Are you set up correctly for remote work? Are you set up correctly to migrate into the cloud? Do you have, in some cases, do you have the proper procurement process for going after an ERP system? Is it going to take your procurement department weeks or months to approve something, a change in the language while we're drafting it before it has to hit the street? Is your legal department, when it comes to contract negotiations, simply not going to have more than 10 hours a week to go through, help you with contract negotiations when you do select a vendor? That expands the timeline to months in a lot of cases to be able to do that. These are all hidden costs. I think the biggest thing, and where I was going with the last piece, is staff time. It's
Yeah.
very difficult for organizations to understand how much of my staff is going to be needed, which ones are going to be needed, both short term and long term, for this ERP replacement. And it's most organizations have not been through this recently enough to understand that it is going to require, maybe I'm going to have to backfill my payroll person so they can be available for evaluation and for demos and pre-implementation and data conversion and user testing, all these sorts of things that have to be figured out because they're just simply a staff resource question. Um, Often does not get thought about initially, which would be a great thing to have early on in a conversation before you even put that budget together. But the other area, the hidden cost, is just change management aspect of it
Mm-hmm.
and future proofing this project so that if there's a leadership change, and quite often there is, most ERP projects last long enough that during any part of the cycle, there's usually leadership change. A CFO retires, someone else comes in, city manager. I've even seen mayors be replaced in the middle, and it's suddenly the whole dynamic of the project changes, or you've got new eyes looking at it who didn't necessarily agree with the vision you had for it. And so they have a lot of questions. What does this do? This stops the entire project because a new executive director is going, I want to understand what this project is. I want to understand why these monthly costs are the way that they are. And I want to feel good that we're going the right direction. And you often have to pause the project, work with that executive director, satisfy all their questions, let them be able to take a look at any part of the process that they want to so they can get up to speed.
Hmm.
and then you can resume. That's a hidden cost as well.
Yep.
Um, Not knowing upfront what your financial reporting seasons are going to look like, or at least talking about that. My financial staff is not going to be available in August and
Yep.
September at all. So these all play out into timeline. They tend to be hidden costs because there isn't a dollar amount attached to it, but there certainly is a resource limitation attached to it, which then translates into dollars and
Yep.
timelines and political capital.
When organizations are thinking about how these projects should be resourced from the consultant, I see a lot of RFPs that just want one project manager, but, their scope is a little misleading because, in my mind, it may take a project manager and an associate consultant, or maybe two associate consultants. So when an executive level individual is thinking about resourcing, how should they think about that? How do they know if they need just one PM, or, they need a full team approach to execute on their project?
Yeah, it's going to be hard for you to sit down and just in your mind envision how this works. But there are a lot of um, ERP implementations where both in our documentation as well as the software vendor's documentation and their scope of work, they lay out exactly what their resourcing expectations are.
Mm-hmm.
Software implementer is going to provide these three resources. There's an expectation that the county is going to provide these seven resources, and maybe two of those resources are Avero provided resources. So there is a starting point in a conversation you can have in looking at some case studies with us where we can show you what the options are. What it ultimately really comes down to is if you as an organization have the staff availability, you have 5 or 6 people that are available to do nothing but ERP 40 hours a week for a year and a half, you're not going to need a lot of resources from us other than project management, PMO, as well as some additional services for folks who do process mapping, which that tends to be our senior consultants do a lot of our process mapping for them, and that's what their experience is. So ideally, if you have the resources, you're not going to need as much from us and as much from the software implementer. That's rarely the case. I've got one client in the past 3 years that had the full team ready to go and ready to use. So we didn't have to have the hard discussion of how are you going to show up for that type of work. And that's when the burden not necessarily gets put back on us, but the question ultimately is, then how is this going to be staffed? If the
Right.
county doesn't have the availability or the city doesn't have the availability to put together an ERP team to correctly staff everything that needs to be done, especially during the implementation, how is the work going to get done? Because the work needs to be done. We can look at a project plan and determine to be able to complete user acceptance testing, which requires the user from the client side. You can automate it to a degree. You can hire someone to come in and run those scripts for you. At the end of the day, it's the client that has to sign off that this is correct and this is what we want to do. It's the reason why things like UAT were created in the first place, is to have client buy-in and sign off. So there's no real way to shortcut those. And if you don't
Yep.
have the time and the availability to put someone in the seat to be able to take a look at that, um, it's not going to do any good how many people I throw at you on my end and the software vendor's end. Someone still has to sign off on that. So looking at the resourcing is very difficult to do unless someone in your organization has recently been through something like that. You're not really going to have a sense as to what that looks like. And a lot of times, honestly, no one's asked the questions.
Right.
They don't know exactly what the payroll clerk is doing on a daily basis. As a CFO, that person's manager does, but no one wants to sit down and look at a list of 50 job descriptions and go, okay, this person would be perfect for ERP. We can show you how to shortcut a lot of that and how to build that out and do that correctly. But that's what it simply boils down to. There are some other reasons as to why it plays out a particular way, where it's PM only, or you need a
Mm-hmm.
full project management team to be able to do that, to supplement and keep things moving forward, and being able to present information to decision makers in a timely way on their project so they can just make a decision and move forward and don't have to do 7 hours of meetings every single week. But honestly, the discussion I have with clients boils down to, if you don't want to use me or the software vendor for this specific area, do you have the resource to do it? Because the work still has to be done.
It does. It does. And I think that's great. There's an example with the housing authority that I've been having conversations with, and they're gearing up for a huge implementation while at the same time they're going through an implementation for a different module within their organization. And I think I gave them sticker shock a little bit on what it would take based on our past experience. And that they was just like, whoa, is this really, the number? And the conversation I had with them is that exact conversation, Robert. If you guys don't have the internal resources to handle this implementation, then you need somebody like Avero to hold your hand and help you complete the items that are needed for the software vendor to have a successful implementation. So,
Yeah, and I really encourage clients, don't just take a number from a software vendor.
yeah.
Tell them to show you how they came up with that number.
Mm-hmm.
Because what ultimately you need to see is you need to see the work behind all that. You need to see the reason why the cost is this is because they assume they need to put 7 technicians or 7 analysts on this project because this is how it's going to play out every single month. Always make the software vendor or consultants like us, make them show you the
Mm-hmm.
math behind the actual number. Don't just give me a monthly number. Show me what the work stream looks like. Show me what the number of hours. Show me what your expectation is of me as a client to be able to provide resources, because that's how you can make your decision, rather than just making a pure monetary decision, looking and going, you're right. I don't have a person I can give you for this. This makes sense that we would need to pay for those types of services. But in this area, I have someone who just went through an ERP replacement at their last employer. Um, I'm going to set them up so that they can be dedicated 75% of their time to the ERP project, and it's easier to have budget and overall cost discussions when you see the reason behind it and the math that actually got you to the price that's being put in front of you.
Yes, and on the flip side, if you are releasing an RFP for consultant services, let us know what resources you have to allocate to this project. Maybe it's none, maybe it's two, but that helps us scope out what we can do for you as well. If we know what resources you have allocated to the project or you think you're going to have allocated to the project. Robert, I want to dive into a little bit of how is AI going to change not only project scopes but how we resource projects going forward. I know we have a ton of live streams on AI and how we still believe that it needs the human element, but a lot of these things that we're doing right now in the initial needs phase can be the timelines can be shortened just because of automation. So can you dive into that a little bit?
Oh yeah. The best approach you can have with AI in these situations is it's a time saving tool to get
Hmm.
you useful information in a timely manner so you can make quick decisions. Um, I just had this discussion 2 weeks ago with someone who their viewpoint, which is correct, which is, you know, it's easy to be smart now with AI. You should be able to leverage AI to bring information to you to better inform you. The problem I have with that is it would be easy to pull together information on a subject I already don't know anything about and
Hmm.
fill my head with some catchphrases,
Yep.
and some good solutions, but I don't actually understand what this means. I can ask AI a number of questions of what's the perspective of a CFO in an organization this size, with this staff, with this budget, with this um, political situation in terms of what the governing body wants to do with public funds, and it can spit out an answer. But if I've never been involved in anything financial with local government, it looks good and it sounds good, but I actually don't know what I'm talking about, because I can say, well, I recommend in this situation that you bring in 2 part-time contractors to get you through this particular period, as well as help you with your compliance. But if I don't even understand why you would need 2 part-time contractors and how it actually fits into the puzzle, then your ability to use the information correctly becomes limited. So it really is best used as information gathering and saving you a lot of time. So I don't
Hmm.
have to read through 7 things. I can dump the information to AI and say, tell me each of these 7 documents, tell me where they state something along this lines. Give me a summary of that. If I have some metrics I can throw at it quickly, tell it, build out some metrics based upon this and evaluate the information and then report back to me. The trick is you do have to do this correctly because you don't want to take anything that's confidential or shouldn't be disclosed
Right.
and dump it into something that's now going to be available or is feeding a giant engine or knowledge base that is now available to the public. So you have to do it correctly and you have to think about what you want to do with it and not just dive into it and see what answers we get. There's also a tendency nowadays to solve problems that don't need to be solved because now you have AI to solve them. And so there
Mhm.
still is the human factor in determining and distinguishing how do I want to use this great tool, something that really is going to save me a lot of time, something that can really automate a lot of things that I do. How are you going to use it correctly so that you don't start chasing down things that either aren't a problem or really have no impact into the overall outcome of what you're looking to do? Meanwhile, this over here would desperately benefit from using an AI tool on it. And we're not focused on that because either someone didn't think about that or it's not the cool, interesting thing that's going to look nice if we're able to check the box that, okay, I now have my controller dumping all of her financial
Right.
information into AI every week and getting a dashboard, but she's not really doing anything with it. She's still
Mhm.
using the broken ERP system to make decisions. So it's not just using it as a tool. It's like, how are you going to use it as a tool? What are your expectations? And what policies are you going to use to govern that information? Allows it to actually be correctly utilized as that time-saving decision-making tool.
Yeah, no, I agree with all of the above. The AI policy is a big one, and we've had Clay Brooks, who is our AI expert within the organization, talk a lot about that. So
Yeah.
make sure you guys look on our YouTube channel and our past LinkedIn lives to go watch that because it is a great live, great live. Well, Robert, I'm going to wrap us up today. I think we shared a lot of good insight into project scoping. Thank you so much for joining me on the live this week. Guys, before we wrap up, make sure that you follow us on all social media channels. We're nerds about modernization in the public sector. So make sure you follow us on all channels. Make sure you join us every Wednesday. Sorry, we had some scheduling conflicts this week, and so we're live today. But every Wednesday at 10 a.m. we do go live. If there's a topic or something that you would like to hear specifically, please reach out. We're very available through DMs and email and phone calls. So please reach out to us and make sure you follow us on all channels. Robert, any key takeaways you want to leave the audience with today?
Oh, the most important one. Everyone have a good weekend.
That's right. It's Friday, baby. It's great. All right. Thank you all.